All right, so thank you everybody for coming and welcome to the spring speaking engagement of our ethical engineering series. This talk is called Engineering in Iraq's Garden of Eden with Dr. Azzam Alwash, and we're also excited for Dr. Alwash to be here. This event is a collaboration between ASC UCI and AAES UCI. My name is Keenan and I'm the outgoing president of this club. Martha?
I'm Martha. I'm the president for AAES.
Thanks. And we're going to be facilitating the discussion tonight. This is the first lecture of a two-part series where Dr. Alwash will describe the Iraqi marshlands, their history, and their process of restoration. In a second lecture next week, at this time, at this same Zoom link, he'll describe the challenges that face our marshes and habitats, and will share engineering solutions that can help build sustainable economies, provided that we have the political will.
Awesome. So I will tell you a little bit about Dr. Azzam Alwash. He is called the savior of Iraq's Garden of Eden, and he is an internationally recognized environmental advocate. He was raised around the Mesopotamian marshlands. Oh, I'm so sorry about that. Of southern Iraq, and he emigrated to Orange County, where he earned his Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering at CSU Fullerton, and then a PhD in Civil Engineering from USC. After practicing in Orange County for 20 years, he returned to the marshlands that were drained by Saddam Hussein to deprive his opposition of cover. In 2004, Dr. Alwash founded the nonprofit Nature Iraq to advocate for the environment and earned the Goldman Environmental Prize, the Green Oscar, in 2013 for his work there. He's currently working with Nature Iraq and the American University of Iraq in Sulaimani, to advance peace in the Middle East through water sustainability cooperation. Before I turn the word over to Dr. Alwash, I'd like to remind everyone to keep their microphones muted during the talk, but feel free to ask questions in the chat. And then after about 40 minutes, we'll have a Q&A session where everyone could just unmute and ask whatever they would like to. So let's begin. A warm welcome to Dr. Azzam, and I will let him talk now.
Hi all. You're living in heaven, and I was there for 20 some years. Though I'm coming back soon. My daughter is getting married on August 7th, so I'll be in your side of the world soon. And I did have my 2 vaccine shots, so I'm good and ready. Thank you for inviting me. It's always nice to talk to young people about engineering in general, but specifically about these wetlands. I noticed that in one of the attendees is Sam Ali. Sam and I go back a long way. Glad that he's still interested in the marshes, though I haven't seen him in the marshes since 2003. Let's get rolling. Let me share my screen first. Okay, so here we go. So you can all see this. Everything's good? Good. We can go? Go. All right. So let's talk about, when we started this work to try to advertise the marshes and their demise at the hand of Saddam Hussein, nobody knew where Iraq was. And I presume, heck, when this happened, you guys were barely born or maybe barely learning how to walk. So Iraq is the land of the 2 rivers, Mesopotamia. If you look at this, if you look at the screen, you will see Iraq right in the middle in yellow, Iran to the right, Syria and Turkey to the north and west. The headwaters of the Tigris and Euphrates are in the mountains of a country that has yet to come about. It's called Mountains of Kurdistan. Kurdistan are basically the mountains of Zagros shared between Iraq, Iran, and Turkey, and a little bit of it in Syria. The two rivers bring in water to what essentially is a desert. If you look at the atlas, you would see that Iraq should by all means be a complete desert. It is right smack in the middle of what is called the Harding Belt. What is the Harding Belt? The Harding Belt is basically the water evaporates at the equator. It goes up into the atmosphere. It tries to come down as rain, but it can't come down as rain because it's too hot in the summer in our area. So it goes all the way to Europe to fall down as rain. So we're right. If you look at the atlas, you'll see a ring of desert just to the north and to the south of the equator. That's why it's physics. Basically, the rain cannot come down in the summer because of the heat. It evaporates back again. It becomes moisture. What it does, it falls as snow and water or rain in the mountains because the mountains are high and cold enough to contain. So there's a big, huge snowpack that starts melting about these days. This is the beginning of the spring. The spring melt. 60% of the waters of the Tigris and Euphrates comes down the river in the next 2 months. That's about, and I don't know how to talk to you in American terms on the quantity, but the flow of the Tigris and Euphrates is around 70 to 100 billion, with a B, cubic meters of water. 60% of it comes in 2 months. That's impossible to handle for the flat land that is Iraq. So what happens is that there is a natural retention basin in the south of Iraq called the Marshes of Iraq. So instead of a desert, when you go to southern Iraq, and these pictures are from Nick Wheeler's book in 1975, Return to the Marshes, you would see endless forests of reed and a water world that is, well, normally we engineers, my era or my father's era we don't call them wetlands, we call them backwaters, we call them wetlands were basically let's not talk about previous engineers, let's talk about today's engineers and the future engineers. In the middle of these marshes, there are people that have lived there since Sumerian times, since the beginning of literally history for mankind. When man began to settle, the first places of settlement were around these marshes. Their life is completely dependent on these marshes. From the reeds, they build their houses. From the reeds, they build their islands on which the houses are settled. They feed the reeds to their water buffalo. They use the reeds for their ovens. They weave mats. The entire skeleton of this civilization is built on top of reed. From the waters, they fish, and their water buffalo roams and eats. And the spring flood is rather important. It became important in the life of the Sumerians because they recognized that the flood brings with it not only beautiful clean water that renews their life, but also deposits of silt and clay that renews the vitality of the farmlands surrounding the marshes. You see, in Iraq, or actually anywhere where there is floods, the rivers have a natural embankment. As the water goes out of the river, the first thing that gets deposited is the sand because it's heavy. And so all rivers have a natural embankment that are created by the floods. The rest of the year, the water is high inside the river, and you can move the water by gravity. You don't need pumps. You don't need vessels to carry the water uphill. The water moves by itself through gravity. So all you have to do is dig a canal, and then so you can increase the area that has been irrigated. So irrigated agriculture started around the edges of these marshes some 9,000 years ago. We don't have a record of that, of course. Our first record is when writing was invented. It was invented in this area about 5,500 years ago. A little factoid, the reason why writing was invented was actually to keep record of debt. So the first writing letter was actually a debt instrument written in front of the gods, so that if you don't pay, the gods will take care of you in afterlife. So writing was invented by bankers. Remember that, and Sumerians were the original bankers. Of course, it's also where the wheel was invented. It was also where Abraham was born. The Abrahamic religion, the Vatican, the Pope just visited Ur about 3 weeks ago and gave a prayer, a unified prayer for most religions in southern Iraq. The work in the marshes is done mostly by women. They are the ones that take care of the children. They are the ones that weave. They are the ones that cook. Men go out and hunt and fish. And life was really very, very simple. I don't want to make it too romantic. Okay, there is still mosquitoes, and everybody suffered from eating disorders. This is a life where why people decided to settle is because there's food year round. Before that, mankind was basically hunting and gathering, right? They go around following where food was. This is a place where food was available year round, and in fact, around the perimeter of the marshes, they began farming by flood irrigation. I don't want to waste too much time because I can talk for hours about the methods of work for these people. I want to concentrate on the engineering part because you're all engineers and you are interested in how that works. So essentially, the marshes are a natural retention basin for the waters of the flood of the Tigris and Euphrates. They become very big and large and wide in the spring. The depth of the water increases, and by the way, that is very important for the evolutionary part of the marshes, because the biology, the diversity evolved around this pulse. So the pulse comes in just as the fish is spawning, just as the birds are getting ready to migrate. So they need to eat a lot, and they start migrating to the north. Because they are smart. They spend the summer in Europe. They don't spend the summer in Iraq where it's hot. So bird brain is a misnomer. Birds are much smarter than mankind. So the entire system of the marshes, the entire biodiversity, the entire rhythm of life was driven by this flood. But more importantly, the flood washed away the salt that accumulates from evaporation from the year before. You see, flood irrigation means that you flood and wheat, rice actually, so when the season is done, you have a crust of salt that basically the water evaporates, it leaves the salts behind. The flood comes in, it washes away that salt, and it deposits a new layer of silt and clay. So we actually the Sumerians spent the flood season, this time of the year, doing that. They had nothing to do because the land is flooded. They celebrated the fertility of the land. They celebrated the goddess of fertility, Ishtar. And then life starts again. By the way, on the top left-hand corner is a picture of a clay tablet documenting the building of a house. And if you look at it, it's very much similar to what the Marsh Arabs today build. This picture was taken in 2003 when I first came back to Iraq after 25 years of living in the United States. And so it takes a lot. It's 7,000 years of heritage. Our people in the marshes are still living more or less the same way as the Sumerians lived, except if you look at the top of that structure, the new structure, you'll see a light. So that light is, and today actually in the middle of the marshes you see a satellite dish, because everybody wants to be connected. We are one village. So electricity has been introduced, and to the betterment, or to, I don't know. And this is inside. This is what you see inside the marsh. Literally, when I first went in June 2003, I had a car thermometer, and it showed 52 degrees outside. 52 degrees centigrade is approximately 120, I think, 122 Fahrenheit. You guys don't know what that temperature is. I think you reach 40 and you die of heat asphyxiation. Well, 52 is quite normal for us in southern Iraq. The point, though, is that this structure is built and developed as a result of the environment itself. You see, they build it with the entrance facing the south or southwest. And so essentially what happens is that the natural flow of air in Iraq is from the northwest to the southeast. And so these structures are basically built perpendicular to the prevailing wind direction. The result of this is that you have pressure on the upside and you have vacuum on the inside, on the other side. So the result of that is, in fact, in the summer, you'd have a breeze going through, cooling you down by 20 degrees. 30 degrees is still hot, but compared to 52 degrees, you're cool. And the method of life, this is a clay tablet that shows crabs and people fishing using fala, what we call fala, and you see a guy in 2003 still has the same instrument for fishing or getting fish. This is a false color picture from, I think, 1973 is the top right-hand corner, the top left-hand corner. It shows you the Tigris and Euphrates. I don't know whether you can see my pointer. You can't see a pointer, so I have to describe it. What you see red is basically, this is a false color picture. You as engineers should know that. Basically, we take the blue and replace it with red. We take the red, we replace it with, okay. You know how these things are created. I'm not gonna waste your time. But where you see black, that's water, right? So you see the lush red indicates lush reed forests. One of the marshes, the Huwayza marshes between Iraq and Iran, then the Settle marshes are between the Tigris and Euphrates. And then Hamar Marsh is basically the passageway for the Euphrates on the south end. And where there's black, basically that means the water is deeper than 2 meters. You see reeds don't grow if the water is deeper than approximately 2 meters. So in 1973, 75, there was no dams upstream. The marshes were still at their epic. 1990, you see the marshes are half dried. You see the marsh between Iraq and Iran completely destroyed, except for the for al-Naaj, the lake called al-Naaj. And the reason for that is basically the Iraq-Iran war. The Iraq-Iran war resulted in the drying of a lot of the marshes because that was where people were fighting. You're too young to, well, no, you weren't born. The Iranians used to use their youth to explode minefields, and the Iraqis used water to flood the battle, and it was, but you can still see that the western part of the marshes are still alive and well. There is enough water to keep the cycle of life going. The marshes between Iraq and Iran are rather sickly. Well, the last one is 1997. What the heck happened? What happened was that Saddam Hussein, following the 1990 invasion of Iraq, of Kuwait, 15 out of 19 provinces in Iraq went into rebellion against Saddam. And this is where I have to speak truth to you guys. The Americans were there. It was 1991. And we saw that the Iranian aligned militias were taking over southern Iraq And so a decision was made to leave Saddam in place. Hopefully the army would take care of him. In short order, Saddam, whatever remained of Saddam's army that was defeated in Kuwait, was used to suppress the Iraqi people. And suppression is a very nice word. In reality, hundreds of thousands died. Chemical weapons were used against our own people. But still, the resistance, I mean, Saddam controlled the cities during the day, but the rebels controlled the cities at night. And where did the rebels go? They went to the marshes. The marshes are our Sherwood Forest. Those of you who know Robin Hood know what Sherwood Forest is. It's where the outlaws go in order to escape the wrath of the sheriff of Baghdad. And so for about 3 years to 5 years, Saddam did not have control of the South. The opposition had control over the South. And where did they hide? They hid in the marshes. So he set about in what I would consider the most impossible engineering project, and that is to divert the waters of the Tigris and Euphrates from the marshes. That is an impossible task. The Iraqi engineers were able to do it by creating rivers that intercept the Tigris and Euphrates and direct the water. I don't have the pointer is not working for me, but you will see a very nice river. You see, nature is never a straight line, right? Whenever you see a straight line, that's something done by engineers. So you see that he built something called the Glory River, which intersects the waters of the Tigris and Euphrates, taking away the marshes, the water from the central marshes. And he actually diverted the Euphrates into the desert. And in short order, he interrupted the cycle of life that had lasted since the last ice age, since the end of the last ice age, for 13,000 years. The marshes existed, and they were no longer as of 1997. The only thing that remained is the area between the Iraq and Iran, and you will see that it is not lush red, but rather a sickly brown, very, 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 very light presence of reeds. The Marsh Arabs were relocated internally and externally. Some of them are actually in your neighborhood in El Cajon, California. There's a big community of marsh refugees. Well, now they're in second and third generation, so they don't no longer have the skills needed to survive in the marshes. Majority of the Marsh Arabs migrated to Iran in refugee camps, and in 2003 we well, hold on, let me show you. This is Central Marshes. This is the area that I used to go to when I was a young boy. This is 1975, so I was probably in engineering school. This is not my picture. It became this. Let me repeat it. What used to be a lush desert, a lush forest became a dead desert in 2003. This is June 24th or so of 2003. And this young man that you see there is Jassim al-Asadi, who still works with me in Iraq. And you see in the distance the remnants of houses, and you see what happened to desiccated, dry marsh. It's very expansive soils. Those of you who are studying soil mechanics, this is expansive soil. Expansive soils means that as they lose water, they shrink, creating huge cracks. This is a picture taken between Iraq and Iran, almost right on the border. This is the Iraqi side of the marshes, June 2003, and this is 180 degrees on the Iranian side. That is what remained of the marshes, the remnant of the marshes in 2003. What did the drying of the marshes do? Of course, it interrupted the normal cycle of life. The fish that used to spawn in the marshes, and by the way, in 1990, 60% of the protein consumed, or the fish consumed in Iraq, was actually from the marshes. You can see on the top left corner, a picture from, well, you see burning oil fields. What happened is that when Saddam withdrew from Kuwait, he basically burnt all the oil fields, all the oil wells, So this picture is probably taken in March of 1991. But what I want to point your attention to is the clarity of the water in the Northern Gulf area. The next picture is 2003, and you will see that the north portion of the Gulf is full of silt and clay. And so what the marshes that used to act as a kidney for the waters of the Tigris and Euphrates no longer was acting that way, and it went all the way to the Gulf. The result of that is that all the shells that Kuwait used to earn its money before oil from pearl diving. So all the oyster beds died. The shrimp catch was cut by half. All the fish catches were dropped. That is for the biodiversity. The reeds, of course, the birds no longer came to the marshes to spend their winter. They had to go elsewhere. One of the birds called, well, we'll talk about that a bit later. The temperature in the area has been documented to have increased by 5 degrees. The frequency of the dust storms increased. And these are just some of the results of the drying of the marshes. So before I went back to Iraq in June 2003, and Azzam will probably remember that, Azzam worked with me on the studies for how to restore the marshes. And I'm glad to see him in the audience. And he was one of the guys that helped in putting the word out about the weapons of mass destruction. You see, people were talking about Saddam's killing fields, Saddam's weapons of mass destruction. In reality, the weapons or the evidence of the weapons were right underneath our noses. If they were really looking for weapons of mass destruction, they'll look at the genocide or the ecocide that Saddam committed against his own people. And in fact, item 11 in the indictment of Saddam Hussein was the drying of the marshes. And I was the guy that wrote the initial complaint in Baghdad against him on that item. Unfortunately, he was executed before the trial for the drying of the marshes. So this is again from June 2003. The people could not wait to come back for the marshes. This, I think, is the first village or the first family that had moved back to the marshes, and we caught them. I think this is probably around June 25th, 26th. People are coming back right next to their old house that was destroyed back in 1991 and settled to renew their lives. And by the way, guys, what I have learned from the experiment or the experience of working on the restoration of the marshes. You see, before June 2003, people were telling me that the marshes cannot be restored. First of all, the seed bed is dead. The marshes have been dry for 7 to 12 years by then. And so they tell me the seed bank is dead. The chemistry of the soil has changed. And more importantly, the skills needed to survive in the marshes are no longer there. Oh, and there was one famous guy that was saying the marsh Arabs don't want to come back to the marshes. They have become farmers and they don't want the way of the marshes. So I thought going back to Iraq, that I would have to fight a battle, first of all, to convince the people to restore the marshes. That is, fortunately, one battle I did not have to fight. Because the Marsh Arabs began restoring the marshes even before I arrived in Iraq. This area, however, I am responsible for restoring because it's right in the central area in the marshes. And we broke the embankment in December 16th, 2003. Water began flowing, and I visited the area on April 1st, and I thought that I had created an environmental disaster. And I didn't show you the pictures here. I thought I created the biggest environmental disaster in the history of mankind by introducing water, because all the experts told me that this is what's going to happen if you introduce water without studying the chemistry. Well, guess what? Experts know diddly. They don't know squat. all you need to do is introduce water and get out of the way. Nature has seen it before. Nature, all you need for restoration to happen is to get out of the way. We engineers are trained to think of marshes as backwards. Okay, I don't want to dump too much on engineers, but we are taught that we can control nature, and true, to a certain extent we can control nature, but nature in the end will win, right? This picture was taken in June of 2004, ladies and gentlemen. See, 6 months, all you had to do is let the water go. The seed bank that everybody was telling me was dead was not dead. In fact, probably what survived is the hardy type, because you know what the seed bed that died, or the seeds that died, are the ones that cannot tolerate drought. So what happens right now is we have a seed bank or a level of reeds that is drought tolerant. So and look at it. It's like my pictures from my youth, 1970s, 1960s. The water buffalo comes back. And this guy's name, I only have him here because he's harvesting reeds for his water buffalo. But the reason why I put him in there is his name is Saddam Hussein. At the time I took this picture, Saddam Hussein was still not under arrest, and I thought that was nice. This is taking me back 17 years. This is the embankment that we broke on December 19th, 2003, and you see that embankment is 7 meters high, about 21 feet high. The dirt of this embankment was brought from outside the marshes back in 1992. Every single piece of dirt in that embankment was driven. You see, the drying of the marsh, I told you, was an engineering miracle, because at the time, Iraq did not have any income. It was not allowed to sell oil. The entire GDP of the nation, every piece of equipment, heavy equipment that was in the nation, was used in order to build these embankments that held the waters of the Tigris and Euphrates in their place, preventing them from flow. And all we did to open this embankment, by the way, is to bring in a backhoe, a very big backhoe, a large excavator, and it dug a 2-foot wide bucket wide trench all the way to the line of the river. Then the water did its thing. It started flowing, and the 2-foot embankment became 7 meters wide in short order, because once the embankment is breached, the water will undermine the rest of the embankment, and nature knows how to reach an equibalence point very, very well. And soon after the marshes, or as soon as the water is introduced, life goes back to normal. And I'm gonna shut up and let you watch nature recover. Soon, Marsh Arabs used to go out and collect reeds, dry them, and transport them to market. This is one of the lakes that was, we thought, was salt encrusted from the pictures that I showed you from the drying of the marshes. We thought, remember I told you there's black areas that became white, and we thought that the white was basically salt that was left behind, and that if water was introduced quickly, it might create super saline solution. What happened actually is the white was shells, they're conicals. And so it wasn't salt. It was actually, when the water was introduced, it wasn't a disaster. Here's some people fishing. Something happened in the intervening time between 1995 and 2003. They've learned how to use electricity to fish instead of nets. So, and I'll tell you a little bit story here, a small story about that. I saw a guy using this. And of course, the use of electricity kills all the fish. It doesn't kill, it stuns all the fish. So the small little fingerlings were getting stunned. And I was telling the guy, this is haram. Haram means not kosher. And he looked at me and says, yeah, you're from the outside, aren't you? And I said, yes, I'm from outside, but I'm Iraqi. He says, hey, what do you want me to feed my children? when somebody answers you that, you need to get off your freaking high horse and come down to the level of the people. These people do not abuse nature because they are abusers. They want to eat. They want to feed their children. They don't have any alternative means. So from then on, I shut up. I don't tell them this is wrong. I don't tell them this is not right, not kosher. This is their land. I'm a visitor. I'm only there to help them make their life a little bit better. So again, we romanticize life in the marshes. It's tough. It's not easy. This is a roadway that was built by Saddam's security to facilitate egress and ingress. And strangely enough, it has become a really nice trade route. This is a fisherman who basically packs all the fish. This is a nice little old truck tire. So it's recycling, sustainability. These people live as a sustainable lifestyle even before the term was invented. They bring in ice, they bring in the fish, and they pack it with ice. And the roadway that was used to suppress the people has become a trade route, opening markets for their wares, for their fish. And this is a net used for hunting birds, ducks specifically. A person sits in a hide. This is a net that is under high tension, and the white stuff that you see is basically barley that brings in the ducks. And when the ducks start eating and they gather, all they have to do is snap the net, and they capture the birds. So there's one city where this picture was taken close to it, was 6,000 people in June 2003. By June 2009, they became 60,000 people. So people began coming back to the marshes very quickly. And of course, I don't know whether you have birders. I'm not a birder, so I'll show you some. This is a basal reed warbler, which is a native to the marshes. When the marshes dried, guess where he migrated to? Can't answer. We found some of them as far away as Israel, in wetlands in Israel. But they came back now and they're home. And this is a bird that actually migrates between Bahrain and he spends the summers in Iraq and winters in Bahrain. I don't know why, but that's there's a pygmy cormorant, and it's one of the threatened species in the world. It came back in. Oh, and this is a beautiful, beautiful picture. This is a marble teal. A marble teal, the world known population was 25,000 in 2003, and I'll show you. In one picture, we actually recorded 43,000 in 2008. I got a call one day from one of my guys in the marshes telling me, doctor, we found these birds that are for sale, these chicks that are for sale. I said, okay, bargain them down. We don't want to create a market for them. Bargain them down and buy them. You see, one of them is a little injured. We brought them to, and we fed them, and we tried to nurse them. The one little guy died, unfortunately. And then when we went to release them, we released one, it stayed in, second stayed in, until all 10 were released. Then they all left together. Isn't that cute? This is a kingfisher. It's a very common bird. It's a beautiful bird. The African darter is a migrating bird that has come back. And of course, when the red eagle, when the imperial eagle shows up, you know that the pyramid of life is back well. You see the water is there. It has zooplankton and phytoplankton, and the fish is eating, and the birds come back to eat the fish, and the bigger birds eat the small birds, and the whole pyramid is back well again. And this is just a majestic eagle. Is it any wonder that everybody puts it on their flags? This is Britain and America together, right, I suppose. And the flocks of birds of my youth came back. Now, we all said the marshes are restored, right? You told me, you introduced me as the savior of the Garden of Eden. I'm not. I am just a simple guy that actually helped the Marsh Arabs and discover exactly where to break the embankments, where to create the magical flow, and how to take care of their land. But what we haven't returned is the flood pulse that I talked about. Okay, so let's use the term, and I have started using this term maybe 10 years ago. The marshes have been reflooded. They have not been restored. Okay, they have been reflooded because the pulse is not there. Why is the pulse not there? This is a map that shows you all the regulators and the dams that have been built since, let's see, the first dam was built in Koot, 1936. Not dam, but barrage. And the reason for them, majority of them are basically for the flood control and also irrigation. In the south, it's mostly irrigation. In the north, it's mostly flood control. And it's basically the engineer's way of trying to control water. You guys go to your nearest, go to the Santa Ana River and look at it. See if it's natural or not. You go to wherever you go, we engineers have managed to think, to fool ourselves into being able to, that we're able to control nature for the benefit of mankind, of course. But what we don't do is calculate the end result of our dams. Dams are now viewed as sustainable energy, renewable energy, the hydroelectric energy is clean energy. Well, that's true. But also the dams have downstream effects. You in the United States have the Colorado River. The Colorado River made Las Vegas possible when Hoover Dam was built. But what happened was, in fact, now the Colorado River is getting choked. You see, the Colorado River used to be flushed out of debris and rocks and trees by the flood that ran through it, the flood that no longer exists. The Gulf of California depends on the water of the Colorado to keep it fully nourished. It no longer has that nourishment. That's what you have in California and between you and Arizona. We have a similar situation. So this is a hydrograph for those of you who are practicing engineers or learning engineering. A hydropulse is basically the EKG of the river. It shows you the pulse. The peaks that you see there basically are the speeds of the water during the floods. And this actually, oh, the scale is missing. It starts in 1920 and it ends in 2010. And you can see in the Euphrates, the pulse of the river kind of got smaller in 1975. But by the early 1990s, it became flatline. The same thing happened for the Tigris. The pulse that kept alive the biodiversity of the marshes is no longer there. But what the engineers in Iraq don't understand is that not only is the biodiversity of the marshes changing, but also the farmlands around the river are actually losing their vitality because they are not being washed of the salt. You see, the Iraqi farmer continues to use the irrigation methods of the Sumerians. And while nature used to heal the marshes every spring, it no longer heals. So the Iraqi farmer is slowly losing his productivity or the productivity of his land due to the fact that his culture, the method of irrigation, has not caught up with the reality. The reality is that the floods are no longer because of the dams upstream mostly in Turkey. Turkey has embarked in 1990s when Iraq was under sanctions and Saddam Hussein could not really object. They built 22 huge dams. Here we're talking larger than Hoover capacity. Huge dams in the headwaters of the Euphrates and now in the Tigris. And I'll talk more about it next week about that plan. But essentially, they're doing it for. We'll talk about why they're doing it, but mostly hydroelectricity was the cause. And while you in the West view hydroelectricity as clean, we in the south of Iraq view it as a death sentence for the biodiversity of the marshes. But I'll tell you one thing of hope. I'll end this part with a hopeful note. The only constant in nature is change. Nature is 4.5 billion years old on Earth. We are here, 70,000 years, we're nothing. We think we can control her. She has seen it all. Southern Iraq, 13,000 years ago, used to be a valley as big as the Colorado River. It used to be an extension of the Gulf that exists now. The Gulf itself is a valley that was carved by the waters of the Tigris and Euphrates, and the Strait of Hormuz used to be 13,000 years ago, where the marshes were. Sea levels were about 150 meters deeper than they are today. That is 450 feet deeper than they are today. So what happened? The ice ages ended. The rains began as a result of the climate change that happened at that time. And the water level rose 450 feet. Southern Iraq became the sedimentary plain that it is today. The marshes moved from the Strait of Hormuz area to where they are today. What I'm saying here is that our time scale of 30 to 60 years is the human scale that we can judge. Nature's time scale is totally different. It's a lot longer. She's patient. We are only a virus. We, mankind, was what, 2 billion people in 1945? We're now 7.5 billion, going on 9. In a period of 60 years, because of antibiotics, because of our incredible ability to control nature? No, ladies and gentlemen, we have grown beyond our means. Our civilization has existed on the harvesting of natural resources in a sustainable way. The Marsh Arabs lived in a sustainable way before the UNDP invented the term. For 13,000 years, they lived copacetically with nature, lived off of nature, and things will go back to normal sooner or later. We, as mankind, you in particular in the West have learned the lesson, but you're still getting there. We still need to learn the lesson. The marshes existed in I'm gonna stop talking because then I don't wanna, I wanna leave you on a high. I wanna leave you on a high in the sense that have faith in nature. She is strong. She can recover. All we need to do is get out of the way, right? And she will reach a level of equilibrium that is natural to her. We don't know where that is. We should be humble engineers. We should learn from her. We should watch her. We should not believe that we can control nature. Yes, we can build tall buildings. Yes, we can resist earthquakes. Yes, we can hold water for 1,000 years, but 1,000 years is a blink of an eye for nature. So there's different time scales. Thank you for your attention. And I will tell you about how we are going to work with the dams in order to make sure that these marshes continue to exist into the future. Any questions?
Thank you so much, Dr. Alwash. That was an amazing talk. Yeah, anybody who wants to ask anything, feel free, or just raise your hand or put something in the chat.
How can I stop sharing? Hold on. I need to stop sharing the, here we go. Is it pause share or stop? Here we go. We good? Goodness gracious, I talked for an hour.
It was a very enjoyable hour. Go ahead, Clint, if you want to ask a question.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Alwash. I really appreciated the presentation. It's a nice little history lesson for me personally, because my parents are both from Iraq, and
oh, really?
So, yeah. So it's interesting to learn about more about a country that I've got roots with, but I've never been to before. So. And looking at the hydrograph, so admittedly, I'm a geotechnical engineer. I don't know hydrological engineering or anything like that. But in looking at the hydrographs, it looks like there has been some restoration, but not to the levels that were experienced at the past. Do you see, and I don't know if like you actually had interaction with the residents of the folks who live in the marsh. Are they resistant to some of the more modern engineering practices that would help restore the hydrograph readings that we've seen to previous levels? Or I guess what do you see in terms of the interaction with the residents in that area with regard to more modern engineering practices that might help restore things to pre-Saddam levels?
Tough question to answer. Iraq has no control over the hydrograph. The hydrograph, the pulse is controlled by dams upstream. The dams upstream are not under control of Iraq. They're under the control of Turkey. Okay, so the natural pulse of the Tigris and Euphrates is not going to return until such a time that the reservoirs are filled with soil. See, I talked to you about southern Iraq being a sedimentary plain. The sedimentary plain means that water came in from the mountains by water and got sedimented. That same sediment is not coming anymore. Where is it going? It's getting deposited in the reservoirs that were built upstream. You see, the reservoirs will get filled with that soil. The same soil that created southern Iraq is now filling the reservoirs upstream. So the dams are 100 years service life. Maybe they'll take 300 years to get filled. But eventually, we're going to have to get they're going to have to empty the reservoirs one way or another, from the dirt, dredging, what have you. Is it going to go back to natural floods? Almost impossible. The dams will have to all go for that to happen. And the dams are not, I mean, the Hoover Dam is reaching 100 years. So that's what I'm telling you, that we as engineers are going to have to work together with and I'll talk to you more in details on how we're planning to do this, or at least the technical idea behind this. But I'll give you a small little hint. With modern technology now, we can predict how much water is going to come, because we can determine from the satellite pictures what is the snow pack and how much water is to be expected coming in the flood. So what we can do is work with Turkey on releasing water from the reservoirs just before the snow melt, i.e. there's a phase shift. We're going to make the flood happen in February, March, instead of March, April, May. Okay, but when we work together, so we can bring in that water. Now you asked me about the Marsh Arabs. The Marsh Arabs, all they want is water. They don't understand the pulse. These are not engineers, guys. I mean, these guys don't, all they know is water is good, fishing is good. Water is good, reeds are great. So as long as you give me water, as long as my reeds are growing, as long as I can fish, I'm happy. Now, I'll tell you though something that is maybe you as a human must understand. Everybody has now smartphones. It's beautiful. In the middle of the marshes, you are connected to America. You can see what the Americans are doing. So the Marsh Arabs they know how you guys live. And guess what? They all want the same thing. They want what you have. And why not? My fear is that if we don't work to provide them with a proper way of life, that they will all pick up and leave because they want to come, just like your parents. I don't know, your parents are probably immigrated to United States in the 70s. Hold on, let me see. Yeah, in the 70s. So they're my age. They basically escaped from Saddam, but they were not crazy enough like me to pick up the good life, to live the good life of. And you're a geotechnical engineer. Guess what? I was working in a company called Pacific Soils Engineering. I was one of the principals. I was a soil engineer as well. Anyway, yeah. So the Marsh Arabs don't think engineering. The Marsh Arabs think, is fishing good today? You see, a woman can go out and harvest reeds in the morning and sell it for what, 30,000 dinars. That's about $20. And $20 is enough to feed an entire family of 10. Their horizons are different than yours. You want a big house and a big, nice land. All they want is just to feed themselves and have the basics of life. I hope that answers you.
Yeah, thank you, Azzam.
What's your family's name? I might even know them.
Yeah, my family's name is Isa. I think my mom is from Kirkuk, and my dad is from Mosul.
Okay, all right.
Yeah,
Djibouti then. All right. Then I don't think I know them. I don't think I remember them. Isa. Islam might know them.
Well, I will go if no one else has a question. Yeah, I thank you so much for speaking this evening. I've been very interested in Iraq, as I actually have my grandmother is from there.
Really?
Yeah, and she's even on this call now.
Oh.
Bibi, I don't know if you want to unmute yourself and ask any question. We'll see if she does. Maybe she can join after I ask mine. I'm curious. Is there any sort of overlapping interest with Kurdish advocacy groups and the geopolitics of the upstream issues? I know that there, as you mentioned earlier, Kurdistan is a stateless nation. How might these kind of two disenfranchised or groups almost collaborate in order to address these upstream issues?
Wow. So you and your grandma, I presume your grandma Bibi is from Kurdistan, I take it.
Yeah, her mother's family is from up there, and I think her father's family immigrated to Baghdad from Lebanon, and they met in Baghdad.
Okay.
Her parents.
All right. So look, I previously said that southern Iraq is a sedimentary plain. And I previously told you that the waters of the Tigris and Euphrates emanate from the mountains of Kurdistan, a nation that's yet to be. So southern Iraq plain is literally the gifts of the mountains of Kurdistan. And its source of life, the water, is literally from the mountains of Kurdistan. And this happened before there were Kurds, before there were Arabs, before there were Turkoman, before there were anybody. This is nature timescale, okay? And literally, if we are what we eat, we are all Kurds. Of course, that line gets a lot of applause in Kurdistan. In southern Iraq, it's like, huh? Say what? But think about it. The intrinsic connection between man and the land is through food. And between southern Iraq and northern part of Iraq predates the existence of humanity. So let's start from that perspective. Now, the very first dams that were built on the headwaters of the Tigris were in Iraq, not in Turkey, in Darbandikhan and Dokan. We have two big, huge dams. And so water management of southern Iraq needs complete coordination and cooperation between Baghdad and Erbil or Sulaimaniya. That is part and parcel of the internegotiations between the self-ruling area, the Kurdish area, the KRG, and Baghdad. Kurdistan continues to build smaller and smaller dams, rightfully so, thinking that the water is theirs and they should get the first benefit. Iraq says, you don't need to build dams up there. There's more dams that we need. We can work together. So it is part and parcel of the negotiations. So everybody has cards and they're playing poker, and the Kurds want a share of the oil of southern Iraq for the water of. So this is no different than how you play politics in the States, right? Texas holds Florida, no, not Florida, holds California hostage for a bigger portion of the federal budget. It's natural. I don't want you to think that there is hostility between Baghdad and Kurdistan the way it used to be before. Before, it was about a total control. We had a crazy man called Saddam, and before that, also military men who are intent on controlling everybody. You shall do what I tell you to. And the Kurds say, this is our land. You can. We are getting into a newer phase of how to deal, and everybody has cards to play. But in the end, I assure you, Baghdad and Erbil will reach an agreement. What the problem is, and next week, if you tune in, we can talk a little bit more about that. The technical solutions are very easy. If you leave the problem in the hands of engineers, we can reach solutions in 2 weeks of negotiations. What's missing is the political will. What's happening in our part of the world is a continuation of the war between civilizations. Iran wants to build the Persian Empire. Turkey wants to rebuild the Ottoman Empire. And Arabs have this Islamic empire. And we are all still playing the same game the Europeans played before World War I and World War II. And you'll see in next week, I'm advocating that we don't need to relearn the lessons of Europe. We don't need 2 world wars and complete destruction and mayhem in order to reach an agreement that our future is together. Our future is based on codependence, coexistence. But the politicians They want their names in history, and that kind of solution does not fit them. They all want to have, they all want to be Churchills, Hitlers, and de Gaulles. And hopefully they won't bring us to those kind of conflagrations. But we'll solve it, I'm sure. The common thread to them, though, is climate change. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about that at the beginning of next week lecture.
Thank you. And Bibi, I see your hand is up now. Do you want to chime in?
I take it Bibi's Aida.
Yeah, that's right.
Go ahead, Aida. Tell her to unmute.
Yeah, she must be working through the Zoom controls.
Yeah, well, if Ida is able to come back, she's more than welcome to ask her question. Before I see people dropping off, and you know, we'll keep on asking questions, but before anybody has to go, I just wanted to thank Azzam, Dr. Alwash, especially for coming. It is currently 6:14 in Jordan, so Dr. Alwash woke up at 4 a.m. just for us. So to any of you going, you know, just please, yeah, give him a big thank you and come back next week. Yeah.
Lawrence's hand is up, so.
Yeah, Lawrence.
Sure, I can wait a second if it's, but.
Go ahead. Well, when Ida gets online, we'll answer.
Okay, I study river deltas here at UCI, and my question is about how these changes to the sediment, the changes to the hydrology of the Tigris and Euphrates have affected sedimentation basically into the Persian Gulf. So you've talked a lot about these marshes, which are in this like large floodplain of the rivers. And after the construction of these projects by Saddam Hussein, there was increased sedimentation basically at the mouths of the rivers. And now that these projects have been removed, there's been decreased sedimentation. What has been the effect on the wetlands there? I guess more in the estuary rather than the deltas.
So the estuaries continue to exist and very well. The shrimp harvest is increasing, so that means that the system is going back to this. The marshes are an internal estuary, right? I mean, they're a sweet water system. I'll go more technical with you. The estuaries are salt water, and the less they don't need sedimentation. You see, Iraq's what's been happening since the building of the dams is that there has been a little bit more erosion of the land mass. There is some eating away, so similar to what's happening to the delta of the Nile, right? The building of the dams upstream in the delta of the Nile has resulted in the delta itself being eroded from the storms from the Mediterranean. And in fact, the seizing of the sediments in the Nile has caused a reduction in the sardine catch. Reversal of what we have, right? Because the sardine and the biodiversity there was dependent on that nutrients coming down the Nile. In Northern Gulf, it did not need nutrients. Nutrients were being deposited in the marshes, and when the marshes were dry, the nutrients were going into the Gulf, increasing the biomass there and reducing filtration. All the stuff that you guys know what happens with sedimentation. So now it's going back to normal for the Gulf. But what's happening for the marshes itself, as you saw, the hydropulse is gone, the sediments are gone. Where are the sediments now? They are being deposited upstream in the dams. And as I told you before, in 300 years, those dams are going to be filled. The hydropulse will come whether we like it or not. And who knows what's going to happen then? But simultaneously with that, you have a warming up of the earth itself. So you have sea level rise. You live in California. They're predicting what? Seal Beach will be underwater. in about, what is it, 20 years, 30 years. So if you have a beachfront property, you need to think about it. Again, the only constant in nature is change. We think we can control pieces, but we don't. We pretend.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and thank you for your talk.
Professor Karwat, it's so awesome to have you here, our last speaker from our last event. Thanks for coming out.
Hey, I want to, before I ask my question, I just wanted to mention that I've been following your work for like a decade or so. I heard you on The Story. Do you remember giving that interview with Dick Gordon?
Well, I give so many stories, but yeah, but that I remember.
Yeah, after you won the Goldman Environmental Prize, you came onto his show, and so I've been following your work since then. It's just like super exciting to hear you speak. I was just wondering if you could say a little bit about this notion of timescale that you've brought up several times, but apply it to the way in which we design technological systems. Particularly, I think about climate change a lot, and I've been feeling that the way in which we've been thinking about how we design technological interventions to climate change, like moving away from fossil fuel technology, investing in quote unquote clean energy or renewable energy, those technologies themselves have their own significant environmental challenges. And the way in which we think about the lifetime and scales of those technologies, I think, is fairly myopic. And so I'm wondering if you could say a little bit about how you think about timescale when it comes to the design of technologies themselves, particularly, there seems to be this dissonance between like the long-term nature of climate change, our interventions in climate change, but those interventions themselves sort of having very small life cycles as well in the grand scheme of things.
That is a deep question. That requires some digestion. But my gut feeling is that, look, our civilization from Sumerian times has been built on the harvesting of natural resources. If it was gold, silver, oil, before that coal, before that whale oil, right? So we have been, and this is probably the Abrahamic religion problem. Sorry, I don't want to offend anybody, but I'm from the town where Abraham was born. So we live, our frame of mind, the Westerners, the Abrahamic faith, is that we are the masters of this earth, right? God created this earth for us. And that's where we move from. Even our engineering projects, from the time we own this world, we are the masters. And so our philosophy is about harvesting and taking from this earth what really is ours. And I believe that is the starting point that has caused us to be thinking that we can master nature. And that we don't think the long term, we don't really see the right picture. The right picture is we are partners, we're not masters. And if we adopt this frame of mind that we are partners with others, with other species, we are not the masters of this earth, we are visitors, then we can start designing projects, start designing a better life for our mankind, with a little bit more humble posture. Where am I going with this? The dams are going to go. I am positive. In 300 years, 200 years, they are no longer. Look, the source of energy for our Earth is the sun. And the sun has maybe 4.5 billion years to go of hydrogen converted to helium, and we'll see what happens. I don't know. But the main source of energy for our planet is the hydrogen of the sun. And think of oil as a very inefficiently charged battery. It took 3.5 billion years of sunlight and interjection with phytoplankton, zooplankton, and that gets deposited. And then, the zooplankton maybe takes 1% of the solar energy to create its cellular structure, and it goes down, it settles, and it created all these oil reserves. These oil reserves are essentially stored energy from the sun. I'm simplifying it, but I'm sure I can. So it's a very inefficiently charged battery that has taken sun rays, gamma rays, and what have you from 3.5 billion years and stored it. And we came in and we consumed half of that battery in what? In 150 years? When was the first oil that it was in Pennsylvania? 1859, right? 1859. So in about 170 years, we managed to consume half of the stored energy. And really, I mean, when I get into argument whether CO2 is the problem, I don't even go there. I say, look, guys, we just consumed half of the energy that took 3.5 billion years to store. Isn't it prudent to develop a different source before we run out of this energy? So don't go into the climate change and CO2. That I believe was a wasted effort. But it was needed in order to kind of create the incentive for all of us to say, whoa, we're gonna die because of the way we have lived. Maybe I took your question to a different direction, but our civilization was dependent on energy. The entire jump in our knowledge that has happened over the past 350 years from the energy age is based on harvesting energy. And we are, I believe, going to go to the original source. The original source is actually the sun. Why can't we have photovoltaic cells? I mean, now I'm old enough, I'm older than you. I remember 2 times before when hydrogen became the talk of, oh, this is the future battery. Hydrogen is cleaner. You burn hydrogen and you get H2O and heat. You don't create the NOx sides and the CO2. Well, now we're having a lot. You have Tesla and you have well, they're talking about batteries, but in London you have hydrogen cells running. I don't want to go too far.
So can I jump in here? So my question is where you're getting at, which is even these photovoltaic technologies that we're developing are being designed with a very limited life cycle.
Yes.
So,
yes.
I'm just wondering, like, what that means or how we might think differently about the design of technologies by using the way in which you have this broad view of time.
Yeah, that's the problem is the profit cycle and how we calculate income versus debt. I mean, now we come into heck, our economy is managed by people who look quarter to quarter. Try to convince them to think in decades is difficult enough. Trying to convince them to think in 100-year cycle is impossible. So I'm afraid that your answer is difficult to implement because we are not. I need to digest it. You need to come back next week. We can continue this.
I'll see you next week. Yeah, we'll talk next week.
We can, and maybe I'll come to UCI when life is back to normal, and we can talk next year. I'm moving back to the United States. Enough of this. 20 years of living this struggle. My daughters are about to have children. I want to enjoy. I'm gonna do it right. So I'm gonna be around your area so we can talk a lot more. But this is actually a very interesting philosophical question. We should think about it, and I have not given it thought. I mean, it's a very thought invoking question. I don't know the answer, and maybe we can share a beer and talk about it and come up with an idea here. Well, I don't know whether they think or not, but I'm looking forward for the beer. It's a very thoughtful question. I need to digest some more and reflect, and maybe, yeah, maybe there is an answer. Maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. All right.
Yeah.
Any other questions, guys?
That was a great answer. I got a request from our board to take a picture, and kind of, we did say that we were going to end at 8:30, and it seems like you're having a good time. So if you want to stay longer, we can definitely keep the questions going. But would we be able to take a picture? Would that be okay with you?
I'm okay.
Just for the memories. Yeah, if anybody wants to turn their camera on.
I'm gonna come back and resume life. But here I am. Do I regret? There's life. Whose life is without regrets? Everybody has regrets. You're too young to understand that, but you'll get to. But the Buddhist thing says if you have regrets, you're living in the past. If you have anxiety, you're living in the future. Just live in the moment and enjoy it. The truth is, the best years of my life as an engineer were in Iraq. It is the time where I felt that I don't need calculators. I know the principles, right? I mean, engineering is not about just calculations. Engineering is about making life better. And so it's been exciting from the professional point of view, but of course it has a price. I lost my marriage. I lost the beauty of visiting for seeing my daughters on their first date, the proms, the spelling bee wins, and all of that. I miss that. The upshot is I was able to say that my education in engineering was beneficial. I have proof. I also, by the way, not only worked on the restoration of the marshes, I am one of the founders of the American University of Iraq in Sulaimaniya. And so it's been an incredible trip of 20 years, but it's time to come back home. Does that answer?
Yeah, I'm not sure what Pacific Hydro Soils does, but I'm also a geotechnical engineer in training, and I totally resonate. I consider myself an expert in what I do. Yeah, I'm young, but I do have a calling to go back home to Vietnam and find out where my people are from. I'm American, but yeah, I totally resonate. And if I'm honest, I don't see myself doing engineering for the rest of my life, but I'm great at what I do. And I really appreciate your talk, and it was very inspirational and thought-provoking. So yeah, let's get a beer next time you're
It's early in the morning for me, so it's coffee.
Right on. Appreciate it.
All right, cheers, man.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Are we done? See you next week.
And I did want to mention I spoke with BB, and she had her microphone turned off for privacy reasons in her settings. It was a whole thing, but she's hoping to tune in next week, and yeah, hoping to talk with you then.
That's my greetings to her, and hopefully I'll see her face next time. And tell her I'm coming back to America in July. If she needs anything from here, I'll be more than happy to bring it with me as just reaching out to other Iraqis or other Americans of Iraqi heritage.
Yeah, that's how she sees it too. So thank you so much. I'm glad you got up early for this.
See you next week.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alwash. We
Cheers.
appreciate you so much. It was such an amazing engagement.
Thank you. Cheers.
Yes, we'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
We'll let you in early next time.